Long before a single weather satellite went up, people on this land knew what kind of winter was coming. They did not guess. They read it off the backs of animals the size of a beaver lodge and the timing of geese leaving the sky. This was not folklore. This was patient observation, gathered over generations and passed down by people whose lives depended on getting it right. Today we are going to look at how Indigenous peoples across what is now Canada anticipated winter severity and why modern science keeps proving them right. First, an honest point, there is no single Indigenous method. The land now called Canada is home to hundreds of distinct nations, plus Inuit and Métis peoples living in wildly different places. Reading winter on the Pacific coast is not the same as reading it on the prairies or in the high Arctic. So when we talk about these signs, remember they belong to specific peoples and specific landscapes. What they share is a way of thinking. Watch the land closely for long enough, and it starts to tell you what is coming. Start with fur. Across many northern nations, hunters and trappers watch the coats of animals in autumn. A hare, a fox, or a beaver with an unusually thick, dense coat was read as a warning. A hard winter was coming, and the animals were already dressed for it. This made intuitive sense. The creatures lived outside in it, with no walls and no fire. If they were preparing heavily, why would you not? So families laid in more wood and more dried food, taking the animals at their word. It was a quiet trust in the land. Here is where modern science steps in. An animal coat is driven mostly by shortening daylight and also by temperature and how well the animal has fed. So a heavy early coat often reflects an early cold snap or a strong food year. That means the sign is real, but it is partly a snapshot of right now rather than a forecast of the season. The old observers were not wrong to watch the fur. They were reading a genuine signal off a living animal. They just had no thermometer to tell them how much to trust it. Now look at the water. Beavers and muskrats turned out to be some of the most reliable forecasters of all. Before a long, cold winter, beavers pack more mud onto their lodges and build bigger food caches underwater. Muskrats build winter shelters called push-ups. And in many Cree and Algonquian communities, the size and number of those shelters were watched carefully every fall. A bigger build meant a harder season ahead. These animals were committing real labor to their prediction. And this one holds up. Beavers and muskrats respond directly to local conditions and food supply, and studies have found that bigger caches do line up with longer ice cover seasons in some regions. It makes sense. The animal cannot leave once the ice locks in, so it has every reason to read the season accurately. When you watched a beaver overbuild, you were watching a creature stake its life on a forecast. That is about as honest a signal as nature offers. Then there is the sky itself. Across the prairies and the boreal, the early departure of geese was a classic cue. When the flocks lifted off sooner than usual, when they flew low or in a particular direction, people read an early or severe winter. Birds do not waste energy on a whim. If they were leaving, they had a reason. Written into thousands of years of instinct, whole communities timed their preparations to the moment the geese went quiet overhead. The empty sky was its own calendar, marking the season better than any date could. Modern science has a name for this. It is called phenology, the study of the timing of natural events. Migration depends on day length, weather fronts, and food. So an early movement really can track an early autumn. Researchers have confirmed that migration dates shift with the climate. The people who watched the geese were doing field phenology by eye generations before the word existed. They had no journals to publish in. They simply remembered and they told their children. Plants spoke too. A very heavy berry crop, or trees loaded with seeds and cones, was often read as nature providing extra before a hard winter. So people gathered and stored more, leaning into the abundance while it lasted. It was a sensible response. If the land offered more, you took more, because you did not know what was coming and you could not afford to be caught short. The full bushes felt like a message, and people acted on it without hesitation. Better to store too much than to face a long winter with empty caches and hungry children. This is the one to be careful with. Those heavy seed years, which ecologists call mast years, are real and dramatic, but they are mostly driven by the previous year of weather. They are not actually a forecast of the winter to come. So the heavy harvest was a genuine event that people read in a hopeful way. The action it triggered, storing more food, was still smart. The prediction behind it just does not hold up as cleanly as the Beaver Lodge does. Some of the sharpest reading was done straight off the sky. A ring around the sun or the moon, called a halo, comes from ice crystals high in the atmosphere, and it often means colder. Wetter weather is moving in within a day or two. People watch these halos along with wind shifts, the look of the frost, and even how smoke behaved. Each one was a small, fast forecast. Read together, they told you what tomorrow would bring. And meteorology backs this up completely. Sun and moon halos are well understood short-range predictors of changing weather. The high ice cloud that bends the light really does tend to arrive ahead of a front. So this was not superstition at all. It was accurate atmospheric reading with the naked eye, repeated and confirmed across countless seasons. The observers had decoded a real optical signal centuries before anyone could explain the physics behind it. They did not need the explanation. They needed the result, and the result was reliable enough to plan a day of travel around. Then there is freeze up, the date the lakes and rivers lock into ice. This was one of the most useful markers of all because it is direct and measurable. You do not have to interpret it. An early freeze up meant a long winter had arrived. And here is the remarkable part. In some northern communities, generations of freeze-up observations are now helping scientists reconstruct past climate because the spoken records reach back further than any instrument ever placed on the land. The old watching has become real data, sitting right alongside the satellites. Nowhere is this knowledge sharper than in the Arctic. Inuit hunters read sea ice, snow texture, and sky conditions with extraordinary precision because a misread could cost a life. They could tell how a snow layer would behave and how safe the travel season would be. That knowledge is so accurate that some Arctic monitoring programs now use it directly, pairing elders with satellites. The expert in the room is the person who has watched this ice their whole life. So, what do we actually take from all this? Not that every sign was a perfect forecast, because some were not. We take the method. People who could not afford to be wrong watched the same land year after year and remembered what they saw. That is the core of science. Careful observation, repeated over time by people paying real attention. The tools were the eye, the memory, and the story told around the fire. And it worked well enough to keep whole peoples alive through brutal winters. Next time you check a weather app and trust the little number on the screen, remember that the same questions were being answered here for thousands of years by reading fur, water, sky, and ice. That knowledge has not vanished. Elders and knowledge keepers carry it still, and scientists are finally listening. If this changed how you see the land a little, stay with me. There's a lot of forgotten wisdom left to dig back up, and we are just getting started. I will see you in the next one.